AFA Today
on AFR Talk.
Then sings my soul, my Savior God, to thee. How great
888-589-8840, 888-589-8840. AFA Today on AFR Talk from the belly of the news beast. Kevin McCullough, glad to be with you in the AFA Today studios. Kevin McCullough is my name. President Obama said, and when was this? This was May 23rd of a year ago, 2013. President Obama said, America is at a crossroads, and we must define the nature and scope of this present struggle, or else it will define us. What we can do, what we must do, is dismantle networks that pose a direct danger to us and make it less likely for new groups to gain a foothold. He was describing the threats outside of Afghanistan and Iraq and the need for America and its allies to nimbly respond. He said, what we've seen is the emergence of various al-Qaeda affiliates. From Yemen to Iraq, from Somalia to North Africa, the threat is more diffuse, with al-Qaeda affiliates in the Arabian Peninsula the most active in plotting against our homeland. Unrest in the Arab world has allowed extremists to gain a foothold in countries like Libya and Syria. He also went on to say other of these groups are simply collections of local militias or extremists interested in seizing territory. That means we'll face more localized threats, which means local operatives, perhaps in loose affiliation with regional networks, launch periodic attacks against Western diplomats, companies, and other soft targets, or resort to kidnapping and other criminal enterprises to fund their operations. So that's the current threat, Obama said. Lethal, yet less capable of al-Qaeda affiliates, threats to diplomatic facilities and businesses abroad, homegrown extremists. This is the future of terrorism. We have to take these threats seriously and do all that we can to confront them. These are the words of the President of the United States in May of 2013. Does anybody within the sound of my voice think he's responding to ISIS with any of the same things he said here? Dismantling networks that pose a danger to us and make it less likely for new groups to gain a foothold. Are we doing that? Are we taking these threats seriously and doing all that we can to confront them? Are we doing that? That's the president's assessment of what we should be doing in May of 2013. 888-589-8840. Okay, a lot of you want to talk about Mississippi, so I guess Mississippi woke up somewhere in the first segment. Mississippi, good to have you with us. Kay, what part of Mississippi are you representing today?
South Mississippi.
Okay, South Mississippi. Weigh in on what happened with your Senate race yesterday.
Oh, it was horrible. It was horrible. I used to go by the Republican office headquarters in our area and get my signs and things like that, and I did not go this time. And they sent somebody to my house, to bring me signs, and I said, I'm not sure I'm going to support that, Cochran. And anyway, I decided to support Chris McDaniel after doing my research. And they, anyway, what I was told is that Cochran did not want to run. Haley Barbour, Phil Bryant, our governor, in the establishment want him to be head of the Senate Appropriations Committee, and they want all that pork and stuff in our state. And like you said, I believe they are afraid of Chris McDaniel, and he is the type of person that we want, we as citizens of this country want, we as conservatives want. But and then I was also told that, Dad Cochran wasn't even going to finish his term, that when he's going to stay in it for a year or two so he can get that position, and then they will appoint someone else. And I thought, I don't want you appointing someone that we don't vote for. And anyway, we are all, and this is another thing, insider thing I got, that if Chris McDaniel won, they were going to enter Thad Cochran as a write-in, which I don't know if that is if they were actually going to do that or
They
not.
may have been willing to do that. They did that in Alaska, and it worked very well for Murkowski. But it's just when you win dirty, it has a very ugly feeling to it.
Mhm. Well, and all the ads here, I mean, I was totally turned off by all the ads, and they were misleading, totally misrepresented everything on both sides. I mean, they built Thad Cochran up and said things that were not totally true to make us think one way, and then they were saying things about Chris McDaniel that were not, to misrepresent things. And they also, you may be aware that in our state, you don't have to declare when you register to vote. You don't have to declare for a party or independent, but ethically, you're supposed to, if you vote in a primary, then you were supposed to vote for that same party in the final election. And they sent, I don't know if you heard about the robocall that they sent out to the Democrats, that Thad Cochran's people sent out, and it was on, I had heard it before, but then it was on Fox News this morning. They sent it out to the Democrats to urge them to vote for, and that was their big push, getting the Democrats to vote for Thad
Right.
Cochran.
That's how he won the election yesterday.
Exactly.
They got people to vote for him that are not going to vote for him in November.
Exactly. So here we are going to be worse off, but they want that. They want that pork. That's what they want. They want the, to say that, he's in a prominent position, and, there are rumors about his mental capacity, and I.
Well, I don't want to go there. That's more like personal stuff. What really bothered me was when I saw the flyer today. Let's go to Christy, calling from Texas, but wanted to weigh in on Mississippi. Hi, Christy. Welcome. You're on with Calvin McCullough.
Thank you, Kevin. First, I would just like to say that Barack Obama is in the business of dismantling the United States. And
that was the subtitle to my best-selling book, The Dismantling of Hope and Change.
Yeah.
That's what he's good at.
And second of all, Mississippi, all you Mississippians who voted in the wrong direction, you're going to reap the whirlwind in all such states, Kevin, because the Bible says whatever you sow, that is what you're going to reap. And this outstretched hand of the United States government and the welfare and all of that, people who do not want to work and yet they vote for their money. Make no doubt about that. They're voting for their stuff and their free stuff. Well, that outstretched hand is one day soon going to become a fist. And that's all I have to say.
Yeah, there's a lot of fear about that. I totally understand where you're coming from, Christy. Thank you for the call. A couple of other Mississippians want to weigh in on the Mississippi issue. Let's go to Chris. Chris, what part of Mississippi are you calling from today?
Meridian, East Central Mississippi.
Okay, East Central. How did it go down in your area?
Of course, unfortunately the majority voted for Thad. This has been such a convoluted situation, honestly, Kevin. The information and disinformation that's floated around has been just absolutely astounding. You made a comment earlier about one of the attacks that was made, stating that Chris McDaniel wanted to defund public schools. Well, that's not exactly what they said. What they said was Chris McDaniel wanted to do away with the Federal Department of Education. And from that, they, kind of made the leap of faith.
Right.
That included defunding schools. That's how they got to that point. Second, I would say one of the things that kind of left a little bit of a bad taste in the mouth of some of my conservative friends here, Chris McDaniel, although he appeared to stand on the right side of most of the issues, the one thing that a lot of people just had difficulty swallowing was the fact that he was an anti-tort reform lawyer, and they just couldn't see sending another one of them to D.C. Kind of a lesser of two evils choice at that point. But third thing I would mention is what Kay, the First Lady, said. There's a lot of talk that a lot of what happened was driven by Haley Barbour, who is a major voice in the Mississippi politics, and that the intention is let Thad win the election, get him in office, let him serve for a little while. He'll retire gracefully. Our governor, Phil Bryant, will then Haley's behest, allegedly appoint Greg Harper, our congressman, to the Senate. And to be very honest, as someone who voted for Greg Harper very enthusiastically as a congressman, he's gone to Washington and become, in many ways, a rhino like most of the rest of them.
Yeah, Washington has this way of corrupting people once people get their hooks in them. That's one of the reasons why I'm so thankful that Ted Cruz spends a lot of time out of the district. I think that the more time public officials spend in Washington, D.C., the worse they become. Just my take on it. 888-589-8840. Obviously, a lot of you want to talk about this. We'll talk about the new intelligence reports for the president as well. But let's talk to James, also calling from Mississippi. James, what part of the state are you calling from?
I'm calling from Hattiesburg, that's South Mississippi.
Okay.
I want to start off by saying this just to get the race card out the window. I'm a 22 African-American male. That's Republican. I've seen how it affected the election seriously in Hattiesburg because I've seen black preachers on radio announcements telling the black community to vote Republican because that Cochran supports Obama on some of his leads. One of my biggest things and concerns about that are how come no one in Mississippi does research? And I'm 22, and it's sad that these people are adults. 40. But nobody does their research. God knows if there's an America by the time I reach that age. But I seriously want to know, how can a preacher who calls himself a man of God support someone who's clearly not doing godly things? And,
James, if we had an answer to that question, we'd have some way of divining how the president justifies what he says, because the president claims Christianity, but stands up and says he doesn't want his daughter burdened with an unwanted pregnancy, supports not just abortion but infanticide, voting in favor of it 4 times before any of the rest of the country had ever voted for it. And totally changes his view on what the Bible says about marriage. And if we had a way of divining that and how pastors get away with that, at least on a spiritual level, maybe we'd be able to have some sort of response. But it's just it's eluded us to date so far. Let's go to Linda, another Mississippian wanting to weigh in on what happened in her state last night. Hi, Linda. Welcome. Tell the nation what happened. What part of Mississippi are you from?
I'm from Northeast Mississippi.
Okay.
And I'm heartsick this morning. First of all, in Cochran's acceptance speech, he said we should be proud to be Mississippians. I am so, at this point, ashamed to be a Mississippian right now. First of all, he was running on being able to bring more money, more goodies to the state of Mississippi, when some of us that do our research know that for 1 cent of our tax dollars that go to Washington, we receive over 3 cents back, and they were bragging about that. Well, that means that other states that probably send 3 cents maybe only get 1 cent back. I'm embarrassed that he ran on how much pork and goodies could come back to the state of Mississippi. But that wasn't even the worst thing. After the demagoguery coming from the Cochran camp has been unreal. And I know from being out in the community as a campaign worker for Chris McDaniel, speaking with African Americans and friends and people in the community, the Cochran camp had the black people terrified of Chris McDaniel.
There's no doubt about it. In the flyer that I was reading at the top of the broadcast, the headline at the top of the page says, "The Tea Party intends to prevent blacks from voting on Tuesday." And it's a flat-out lie. There was no effort by Chris McDaniel to prevent anybody of any color from voting. What he didn't want to have happen was people that didn't have the right to vote voting. And they're interpreting that as, this is what the left does. This is what Democrats and the leftists do all the time. They take things, they lie about them, and then they use that to scaremonger people into taking some sort of drastic action. So what Cochran is doing out there, is running around saying, oh, Chris McDaniel, he's racist. He doesn't want to let black people vote. And then, as James, who just called, was describing, people, that spreads. Oh, hey, Chris McDaniel, he doesn't want black people to vote. Next thing you know, somebody's saying that he's, dressing in whites and wearing a hood and all the rest of it. I mean, at the end of the day, even if the senator himself did not sign off on this flyer, there should be a deep reckoning within the Republican Party of the state of Mississippi to make sure that this kind of stuff doesn't sprout up in their elections. That you don't do this kind of stuff. You don't just flat out lie about your opponent. The top paragraph of the flyer says, according to the Clarion Ledger, Chris McDaniel and the Tea Party plan to protest Democrats voting in the Senate runoff Tuesday between Thad Cochran and Tea Party candidate Chris McDaniel. We know Tea Party uses Democrats as code for African Americans, says the author of the flyer. They're not giving any proof. Don't be intimidated by the Tea Party. Turn out for all Mississippians. Vote for Thad Cochran. Thad Cochran works for all Mississippians. If I was Thad Cochran, I'd be so ashamed of these tactics. I'd resign my post today. That is, if you had character and backbone, that's what you'd do. I don't know, Thad Cochran's camp. Any of you that work for the senator have any backbone? I dare you to call in, defend your campaign tactics here on national broadcast. I'd love to hear from you, you chickens. 21 minutes before the hour. Don't go away. AFA Today on AFR Talk.